Okay, welcome back to now the second part of the obstacles to critical thinking, our class of Introduction to Logic here at Labette Community College. This is lesson 4 and our fourth week getting into understanding these thoughts about critical thinking and logic. So starting on page 33, you will see and through page 37, fairly short, but I'm going to give you kind of a lengthy version of what is these pages are talking about. We're looking now at obstacles that are by our philosophy, the way the what we think. These are common impediments to critical thinking. We've already gone over to a little bit of how we think. It's the psychological obstacles, and these are hindrances that occur because of what we think. They're the philosophical. That could be epistemological, that is, can we really know? That's getting deeper into philosophy, and we're just not going to get here. Some people doubt what we can know and how do we do that. But yeah, and some of those are skeptics. We'll be talking about them here in a moment. There is some group-centered thinking. We have a tendency as human beings to want to be a part of a group. We want to be included. We want to be accepted. But the problem is that there's some trouble when our conformatism, when we want to conform, hampers with our ability to think straight and to think critically. So we need to make sure that we can think well and not be prejudiced or biased, not be a part of a group that is racist, to not be pushed by peers, but to be able to stand alone in our thinking and know that it's right and true, valid, strong. And so we need to be cautious about stereotyping. So these are things that do hinder our critical thinking skills. And we've gone over those. Now we're going to be looking at some things that have a different bent, if you will, a different focus. It's called our worldview. We come in with a certain amount of assumptions in our way of thinking when we enter upon projects or groups. And we have so it's called a worldview. And a worldview, really the way I'm going to present it here, he doesn't present it this way in the book necessarily, but there are 5 questions that a worldview should answer. And they help us understand our own origins. In other words, where do we come from? What is our destiny? What's my purpose in life? Meaning, morality. Where do I get my morals? And reality. What is really real? Where do I come from? Where am I going? What's my purpose? And where do I get moral knowledge? Where do I get truth? Now, science and philosophy deal with knowledge, and epistemologically, they understand that, hey, we can know. We can know that iron melts at a certain temperature, that water boils, 220 degrees, that oxygen freezes at negative almost 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And thousands of other scientific facts. We can know stuff. So knowledge is achievable. And that's what science and philosophy is based on. And it's also based on the fact that knowledge is not based on my belief or your belief. No, your science, your philosophy is not based on just what you believe. At least it shouldn't be on just what you believe. There are some truths, whether you like them or not. And that's what we should be looking at, and that's what really science is based on, and that's really what philosophy is based on. But there are some challenges in our neighborhood. Within the human realm, there's a philosophy called subjective relativism. It's a view that truth depends solely on what you believe. Truth is relative to the person. That is, you have your truth and I have my truth. I bet you have heard that, haven't you? You believe what you believe, and I'll believe what I believe. That is subjective relativism. There is a larger problem going on, and it is not just subjective relativism, but it is in a whole grander scale, our whole society. It's called social relativism. Same things work on it as subjective relativism. Before we hit that area, let's look at some problems with this individual stance of subjective relativism. First, it claims it's infallible. You believe what you believe, I'll believe what I believe. That's just saying that, hey, whatever I believe is true. You can't change me, dude. I hold the truth. You can't change my view. You don't hold the truth, I do. If we're not careful, we're saying that we are totally omniscient. We have all understanding. We're all knowing. And this claim, as this book points out, and other philosophies point out, that it is a problem of infallibility. We cannot claim to be that. We know that human beings have fallible ideas and actions. But if we hold to this view of subjective relativism, we're claiming to be infallible. I am right all the time. I have no errors. And you're also claiming that there is moral equivalence. In other words, that's what people are saying when they say you believe what you believe and I'll believe what I believe. That whatever, everything's okay with you, everything's okay with me. Just go on. You're saying all moral ideas are equal, and we know that's not so. That's why there are wars. World War II was in part based on the fact that we didn't think it was right to just kill Jews. Now, honestly, I don't think most people understood that was going on until the war just about ended. But we understand that not all views of morality are equal. And, but that's what you're claiming if you're a subjective relativist. And we can recognize from a philosophical point of view that this is an incoherent view. It's inconsistent, and it's absolutely false. Its own truth implies its falsity. It's inconsistent with itself, because you can't say, I believe what I believe to be totally true and I'm infallible, and then expect someone else to hold different ideas and ideals, a different ideology, and say the same thing, because they're going to butt heads. They're self-defeating. And you can't say, hey, I'm going to tolerate. You have to tolerate everybody, except for you can't tolerate them because they're intolerable. Well, that's inconsistent. That's hypocritical. We hear people doing that all the time, and they love to point out possibly maybe a church doing that, or a Christian or some religious group, but they hate to recognize that that's what they're doing. If it is objectively true that all truth is relative, then it's also objectively false. And I think we all recognize the hypocrisy of saying, oh, you got to be tolerant to everybody, but you can't tolerate them. But anyway, that's subjective relativism. And then we turn to social relativism. It's another philosophical obstacle. These are the two grand obstacles, at least from a philosophical point. They're not the only two. But social relativism is just on a grander scale than personal or relativism. A subjective relativism is the person, an individual subject, and social relativism is the society, the larger group. This view does the same thing. It's just that truth is relative to societies, not just within a person, but within a group of people. France can have its social ideas and ideologies. Germany can have theirs, America can have ours, Brazil, and so on. But we know that is a problem because it has the same faults as subjective relativism, that they're claiming that they're infallible when in fact they are fallible. And they don't hold all truths in just a society. It's just a bigger problem than just the individual. Other societies they're saying that other societies are beyond moral criticism. Well, we know that's not true. Not that you can't criticize people, you can. It may be illegal to criticize some people in some societies. For instance, in Canada, you can't criticize Muslims. It's illegal. In America, you have the freedom to criticize anyone right now, and that may change. But what we're saying is other societies are beyond moral criticism when we hold this view. And we're saying then, too, that moral reformers are unnecessary, and there cannot be any. But we know people like Martin Luther King. He had a great idea, a wonderful dream, that we should all be equal, and we should be, and we are. But not everyone sees it that way. And that's where reformers come in and try to make sure that we are clarifying our understanding and help us to be, say, more equal in his case. We cannot say that our society is infallible. Certainly not talking about America, not talking about anywhere in the world, actually. And like the subjective relativism, social relativism is self-defeating. The only thing we really added there is that the moral reformers are unnecessary. And you'd kind of say that with subjective relativism, in that you can't really better yourself. There's no self-improvement. So once you say whatever, what is there to improve if you're perfect in every way, right? But there is another philosophical obstacle, and that is skepticism. Philosophical skepticism is the view that we know much less than we think we know. It's really, in action, skepticism is about an underlying doubt about knowledge. And they are skeptical about everything or most things, and they don't hold most things to be true. Their personal worldview is to question most things. Now, we're not going to go full throttle here on skepticism, and it's not in the book, but I would like to point out that skeptics are a very sarcastic group of philosophers. They doubt most things, and they hold that there are no absolutes. The challenge for skeptics is to answer this question: are you sure that there are no absolutes? If they say, yes, there is absolutely no absolutes, well, they're holding one, and then they are fallible as well. They try to undermine most kinds of certainties that you might have, and from the vantage point of language, maybe, because language is not always clear, they might doubt an issue or a cause that they may have. One form of this view says that knowledge requires certainty. If knowledge requires certainty, then we know very little, but we sometimes do seem to have knowledge even though we have no real absolutely conclusive reasons, maybe. All right, that's skepticism. So all of these come down to this one thing in this video is that we have some bad habits of the mind and we need to clear them up for good critical thinking skills. We have a tendency to resist evidence that flies in our face of especially our cherished beliefs. Yeah, well, we need to bone up and stand up and be strong and listen to contrary evidence. We have a confirmation bias. Sometimes the tendency is to seek out and to use only confirming evidence. Well, we need to change that. We need to grow a little. This is maturing our minds and helping us be better thinkers, more logical and more understanding. And we'll have more knowledge by which we can evaluate. We need more knowledge to evaluate. That's what judges do. It's really what the Senate and Congress actually as a whole should do, to take in all sides of the information and not have a bias. But there's a tendency for us to have this availability error. That is, we rely just on simple evidence, something because it's memorable or striking or maybe just easy to get to. These are obstacles that are against critical thinking. Now, critical thinking itself doesn't guarantee absolute certainty, but with a system, it can help us evaluate claims in varying degrees with varying degrees of reasonable doubt. There may be some doubt, and that's understandable. I think it's healthy to be somewhat skeptic. But we can understand if ideas are with critical thinking skills and with this logic. We can understand if ideas are valid or not, if there are weak or strong reasons for holding such claims. And that's what we're going to look at next week. It's really next week we're going to look at the argument itself and the layout there. But remember this week to do your worksheet. It helps you grasp the vocabulary for the language that we're using of this philosophy, critical thinking. The assignments and discussion boards are designed to help grasp these concepts and help better understanding of your ability to think critically. And next week we'll look at the actual structure and design of arguments. So have a great week and see you next round.